Hi, this is Pia from UFO Denmark, and our group would like to welcome Melinda Leslie to the UFO Sundays program we have here. And Melinda has been speaking about UFOs for almost 30 years now. She's an abductee and has been also speaking about the connections to the military abductions. I will let Melinda speak more about her experiences and her own stories. So welcome, Melinda. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here. This is kind of the first presentation I've given in Europe, if you will, and I'm so excited about that. So thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure. Thank you for doing it. You can just begin when you feel ready, and we're looking forward to hearing all about what you have to tell us.
Well, as you said, I'm an abductee, and I'm most known in the community for my research into milabs, or also called sometimes milabs, which is an acronym for MIL for military and AB for abduction. I've been very involved in the whole UFO community as a researcher and investigator since 1989, so as you said, about 30 years. I went public with my own alien abduction experiences about 28 years ago, and I now live in Sedona, Arizona, where my full-time gig, my full-time job, is I do a UFO sighting tour where I take people out with military night vision goggles on tours to see UFOs. I guarantee sightings, your money back. Of course, we're using Gen 3 military night vision goggles. And we have sightings every time. I had a tour last night. I have another one tonight. Last night was tour number 1079. So if the weather's clear tonight, we'll definitely be on 1080 tonight. So I've done it a few times. And as I said, I guarantee sightings, your money back. We always see them. So with that, are we ready for me just to give my presentation?
Yes, please.
Okay, here we go. Well, so is the first slide up so everybody can see it? All right.
Yes, it is.
So this is the covert program of reverse engineering extraterrestrial abductees, otherwise called milabs. Again, as I said before, MIL for military and ABS for abductions. And then my subtitle is The Experiences, Evidence, and Implications. And I'm just trying to find my mouse here. There we go, so I can do this easily. Okay. It is an evolving state of research. There's the public view of ufology, the current versus the current state of ufology, and where we're headed in this community. And from one end of the spectrum to the other, which I've done by this arrow, as you can see going across the screen. So first off, there's the public view of no UFOs, which is an unaware public, a misinformed public, skeptics, and debunkers. And then in the middle, somewhere in there, you have the media making huge strides in public awareness. Obviously, the results of the To the Stars Academy and the release by the Pentagon of the ATIP program, Advanced Aerial Threat Identification Program, the media's attention here in the US anyways has been huge. I'm not sure about how it's been in Denmark, but here in the US it's been absolutely huge. You have here the New York Times and the Washington Post doing articles on it repeatedly. I believe there's been 4 in the New York Times and 3 in the Washington Post in the last year and a half. And of course, TV news response to that. And then you have things like the popularity of the Ancient Aliens TV show. Again, I'm not sure how popular that is for you guys, but here it's huge. And Coast to Coast AM radio show, other TV and radio shows, and online and social networking, which of course is huge, as demonstrated by what we're doing today. Okay, and then you have the best evidence in ufology. So there's scientific evidence of sightings, night vision goggle sightings. I get a shameless plug in there, but yes. FOIA documents, Freedom of Information Act documents released, landing trace cases where there's landing traces. lab work cases where there's lab work from, you know, everything from sightings and experiences and landings and whatnot. The surgical removal of implants, I go back to the work of the late Dr. Roger Lear, who did 17 surgical removals. But then there are other people who've done that. There's a group in Japan that's done a few, and I know here in the US, obviously, a couple other researchers. So surgical removal of implants. The Cash Landrum case, very famous. You guys are probably familiar with it. Of course, the Walton abduction case, lots of witnesses, evidence. The Malmstrom Air Force Base events of the shutting down nuclear missiles, you know, shutting down missiles and other things with nuclear bases and whatnot, and so Malmstrom and others like it. Of course, the Roswell, with its new physical evidence now, there's all sorts of new evidence coming forward with possible metallurgy and metal samples. Of course, you have and you know, over 300 firsthand witnesses now, and military sighting cases. For instance, the Rendlesham event, you know, Bentwaters Rendlesham case, the Nimitz and Tic Tac case, the Go Fast and gimbal footages as well, the Tic Tac footage, the Go Fast footage, and the gimbal footage, as well as others. Those are just in the very current news. And of course, disclosing insiders' hearings. So there's hearings, you know, that have happened over the years with insiders disclosing what they know. So next. Okay, so again, evolving state of research currently and where we're headed and ultimately need to go. So now I have the best evidence, the same stuff I just went through in the left-hand category, and on the right, I have the milab's research. So we have the best evidence, all absolutely needed. It's all very important without a doubt. And then, you know, other people may feel that there's best evidence cases, but I listed some of the obvious ones there. And then the milab's research. So in that, and what is needed for this community is things contained within that research. For instance, the reverse engineering programs, understanding what's going on there, how much. The applied ET technology programs, where ET technology is being applied by the military and the government, governments and militaries of the world to current technology development, to the aerospace community, etc. There's ET interface technology. That's where our technology and ET technology may interface together. The connection between them and that knowledge and, you know, what may be available and applying that to our technology. Underground base activities, obviously, what's going on in underground bases is something that should be very important to this community because that's where the research and development is happening. The high strangeness covert projects, everything from the reverse engineering of the technology, propulsion, navigation, to other possible spin-offs. Of course, the whole secret space program. The idea of super soldiers gets into this research. The psi base, that's mental, like psychic, you know, psi-based technology development. The recruitment into covert programs that's happening to many insiders and individuals. Hybrids and ETs living amongst us, another area that comes up not only in this research, but I think is becoming more and more prevalent in the abduction field, that hybrids and ETs are living amongst us. And then, of course, ETs and humans as consciousness, the whole consciousness area of study, and that there's an interrelationship between ETs and humans. The scientific study of consciousness, that's a huge growing area. And then last but not least, abductees' rights issues. The rights of abductees are being addressed before disclosure and official disclosure happens. Because when disclosure happens, abductees could end up being very much, you know, thrown under the bus. And so I think it's really important that we start to address abductees' rights before any kind of real disclosure starts happening, not wait and then have to mop up afterwards. So I think this is something that more and more abduction researchers are getting into now. And as I said, these are all the things we need to do now. Okay. So next, you can go right to here. Okay. So what happens to the abductees? So this is an AKA, in other words, what makes a milab? Okay. So I'm just going to run through this because I have a lot to cover in this presentation, and I think I want to try to keep it to about an hour and a half. So first is being watched or being followed and having your home or workplace under surveillance. So I want to emphasize to everyone before I get further into this list is that milabs means a lot of different things to a lot of people now. That term has kind of been hijacked by other research communities and by the mind control community, as an example. In my research, when I say milabs, I'm talking about alien abductees who are being targeted by covert human agencies. So it starts with, in my research, I don't get into your case unless you're first and foremost an alien abductee. Now, I realize it's kind of become a bigger term than that, and I'm not addressing only in passing some of those other implications, but my main focus in my research is working, and it's my own experiences. I've had 9 military abductions, at least. Those are the ones I know about. There could be more, but and that's kind of how it works. But I have 9 of those, and then I have the harassment and surveillance and monitoring, etc. So my research specifically focuses on alien abductees who get targeted by covert human agencies, military, covert intelligence agencies, and it could be others. I won't just rule out to just the military, community, Black Ops military or Black Ops intelligence agency, but others as well. But any covert humans it involves. So, okay, so again, emphasizing that I'm talking about this happening to abductees and that being the focus of my research. So it starts with, for instance, what happens? Okay, being watched or being followed and having your home or workplace under surveillance. Then it can go into black helicopter surveillance or harassment, threats made to the abductee, their family or friends, phone, electronic interruptions, and harassing, intimidating, or threatening phone calls, email and or snail mail tampering and computer hacking, in-person, direct, face-to-face confrontations and warnings, and, for instance, Men in Black experiences, etc. Any kind of interaction with a human agent or military personnel. Okay, illegal break-ins to one's property, for instance, their homes or their vehicles, underground bases visited and advanced technology scenes. So now we're ramping up to being abducted by the military. Okay, underground bases visited with an advanced technology scene. Implants being removed or inserted by humans as opposed to just ETs. So you can have an ET implant and have covert humans remove your ET implant or insert you with a human implant. Both happen. Then there's abductions by ETs where you're taken by ETs, so it's normal extraterrestrial abduction or alien abduction, but then having human military personnel also present or being handed off by the ETs to military personnel. I call that a handoff. You can be removed from your car, hotel, environment, home, by ETs, but then at some point they hand you off to covert military. I've had many cases that have had that happen as well as myself. Okay, they're abductions by human military. In other words, this time as opposed to being taken by ETs, you're taken by the military, but you can have ETs present. So it can be pretty much a military abduction in an underground installation, as an example, or taken to an underground installation, but you can have ETs present there. There's abductions by human military only without any ETs present. So this is fully, maybe you're picked up by human military, maybe you're interrogated about your alien experiences or have medical procedures, but you may never see an ET presence. So whether you're taken by ETs or taken by the military, brought back by ETs or brought back by the military, you may or may not see, you know, of course, there's also fully ET abductions that don't involve the military at all, of course. But I'm talking about when it does, or covert humans. You can also, you know, be taken by covert humans and not see any ETs, but yet have it, the reasoning or the reason behind it being that because you are an alien abductee. Okay, so mind control procedures with intimidation, fear inducement, hypnosis, and drugs administered. There's lots of mind control done throughout these procedures with those things I just listed. In-depth interrogations or debriefing procedures. There's being roughed up or physically abused by the covert humans. There's medical and genetic procedures, exploratory surgery, removal of possible alien fetuses, and possible cloning experiments done at the hands of the military abductors. There's testing and demonstration of psychic or paranormal abilities. There's the involvement by intelligence community insiders or minders in the daily life of the abductee and or a high interest in their case. Very advanced abduction cases, and I don't mean advanced like better or anything. I mean alien abductees that have had it happen their whole life, that start to have some variation of everything I just listed happening, will also be befriended by intelligence or community, you know, intelligence community or military insiders. One abductee coined the term minders. I'll get a little more into that later. And these folks affecting or interacting in your daily life. They can befriend you and have a high interest in your case. And there's some very famous abductee cases where some of these minder individuals became very involved in their case. I'll get a little more into that. So there's being recruited into covert programs willingly, consciously. So this is when you can get recruited into a covert program as an abductee. You're then recruited to do covert work, and you can do so willingly, consciously, with choice, you know, where the abductee gets to make a choice. Or you can do it unwillingly or unconsciously and get recruited in your abduction event to participate in something without your conscious or willing participation. So what happens to the abductees? Well, first there's black helicopter harassment. This is taken by an abductee of a black helicopter circling over their home. And note there's an additional unknown object in the sky near the helicopter that was blown up and examined, and it does appear to be a UFO in the sky at the same time. But here's a helicopter circling. Experiences of being watched or being followed. These pictures, even though very similar, are taken many, many years apart by two different abductees. And this is black van surveillance with black vans parked outside of where they live or circling their neighborhood, etc. One was parked in the person's driveway. They came out to film it. That's the image on the left, and the van pulled away. And the one on the right, you can see they're kind of down this long, narrow little street going to their house. That's a, not so much a driveway, but like a private drive. And there is a black van parked there, completely out of place. This is drawn by one abductee of her black helicopter harassment. Being followed by a car with tinted windows, being photographed by a car pulling up next to her and the guy taking multiple photos of her, and an abduction from her backyard. And I don't know if you can see, but behind these guys in black, she's laying in a chaise lounge, lounge chair in the yard, but there's black vans in the back, and these guys, vans pulled up behind her house, and guys got out and sprayed something in her face that knocked her out. So that's that scene. Now this is from my own experience. I drew this many years ago. A little embarrassed, but being taken to an underground base. That's me on an elevator in an underground base. This is drawn by another abductee, abductions by human military only. So this was one, and she saw several men. She was being escorted. They were all wearing khaki uniforms and had the same patches on their sleeve. And here they're sitting at some kind of control panel. That's just from her memory. You can be abducted by human military with ETs present, as I said. This is a picture. It's a little hard probably to see, but you can see there are ships on to the side, like what are familiar as cigar-shaped ship cylinders parked. And then there's a hangar with one in the hangar, and she tried to draw like an aerial view of what she saw from the ground. What happens to the abductees? They're abductions by ETs with human military personnel present. Here's someone who had an ET abduction. They're taken into like this cave environment, but there's military guards on the side of the cave holding guns. These are all these drawings are extremely typical. This drawn by one insider, but this kind of thing is seen by abductees, which are craft that may have been built or back engineered by humans. So technology seen that may be ours, but derived from ET technology in these base locations. And technology that may be theirs. This is somebody's recreation of the hangars at infamous Area S4, part of Area 51, Nevada, with the 9 hangars in the bays or whatever. And so you may see stuff, and some abductees do claim to have been taken there. So, so you may see stuff that is clearly ET's, theirs, not ours. You can be, interrogated and having debriefing procedures. In-depth interrogations and debriefing. This is a group of 3 male abductees sitting at a table in a debriefing situation drawn by them. And then you can have mind control procedures with fear inducement, hypnosis, and drugging. This is the syringe someone saw, kind of air injection with a needle. They felt no pain, and it was somehow, air powered, giving them an injection. You can have mind control procedures done. This is a human scientist or doctor, obviously, getting ready to perform what the abductee, with the male abductee, was told was a brain mapping procedure. This experience occurred in a military base hospital. So on a military base in a hospital, but this was during a military abduction by this person. Kind of a graphic picture. This is from one of my experiences. This is drawn by well-known artist Bill McDonald, of my own experience. And you can have, so I use this as an example, you can have medical and genetic procedures and removal of possible alien fetuses. I had a medical procedure performed in this very hazmat, hazardous material type, tented clean room environment in an underground base. I'll get more into that in a minute. What happens to the abductees' medical and genetic experience? An abductee claimed, many abductees have seen what they thought were cloned humans. That's what that's a drawing of. What happens to the abductees? There's mental testing and development of psi, paranormal functioning abilities. There are these chairs often referred to in the super soldier mind control community as trip chairs. So I borrow that from them. They borrow stuff from my research, so I borrow that from them. Trip chairs as described in various mental and psi procedures, and quite a few people. Now, the bottom 3 are all, to the left, middle, and bottom are drawings by people who've had those experiences. And this one on the left is a room with the trip chair in the middle of it, obviously. The kind of the top right picture is just a outpatient surgery chair, but I included it because it's so similar to what has been described, and that's for outpatient surgery in a medical facility. Again, more trip chairs done by different people who've had that experience. What happens to the abductees? There's being roughed up or physically abused. Now, I realize this is a very controversial case, that of Stan Romanek, but he was beat up repeatedly. You guys, I stand by Stan. it should become a new phrase. I stand by Stan. But I stand by Stan Romanek. Yes, he's controversial, but only because I believe that he was framed for possible child pornography being on his computer, and he did the time required and is no longer serving. But he was an alien abductee. He was a very extensive milab case. Many witnesses to the milab experiences, not only the abduction. And there was one time he was riding his bike to work. That's the picture in the upper left. And a van pulled up next to him, yanked him off his bike. He didn't have a car at the time, so he's riding his bike. He's yanked off the bike, pulled into a van, and had the, pardon my language, crap beat out of him. And then the bottom right was another experience at a much later date. And when he was in the hospital. So he's actually in the hospital when that photo is taken. Now I have new research, which I call recruitment programs, where people can be recruited. It's not so much new anymore. I should probably update this slide, but I've been doing it now for a couple of years, where people get recruited into certain, covert programs. And it started with my awareness of what I call military on military cases. These are ET abductees who joined the military and then had military reabductions or milab type events while they were serving. Now, sometimes, yes, it happened while they were serving, and there's also a few people that joined the military and then have it happen after they left the military. But I'm going to start with these ones that while serving in the military had a military abduction related to their extraterrestrial experiences, but they were a sitting target in the military. So there's Niara Isley. She had 3 months of missing time, was abducted during an ET-related military operation while on assignment at Area 51, and then got abducted from there. A gentleman by name Bruce Coe, 3 weeks of missing time and used in an ET communication role, actually had that happen repeatedly. Ray Muniz, 2 years of missing time and specifically used in an ET communication role. Actually had 2 years. It's an amazing case, you guys. 2 years of missing time, remarkable. Dan Sherman, very famous, wrote the book, I think it's called Above Black off the top of my head, but he wrote that book and had, with full consciousness while in the military, was used in an ET communication role, but also was used in an ET communication role in full consciousness because he was an ET abductee. So he wrote all about that in his book. Larry Warren, another kind of controversial figure, but I stand somewhat by Larry, at least his initial story of being a witness to the Rendlesham event. But he had an interrogation event on night 3 of the famous Rendlesham Bentwater. And then a week later, and maybe 2 weeks later, him and the other gentleman, well, they all had this going on night 3, but also a week or two later, had a subsequent military abduction. A lot of people are unfamiliar with that, but yes, that happened. And the guys don't talk about it a lot, but they do talk about it privately. They also had alien abductions on night number 1 and night number 3 of the Bentwaters Rendlesham case. And again, I'm constantly encouraging them to talk more about that. Linda Moulton Howe has had them regressed, and they recall alien abduction events. So let's just say that much. But Jim Pennis, okay, so going back to Larry Warren, Jim Peniston's, again, same reason, and John Burroughs, interrogation event on night 3 and additional milab, plus John Burroughs had significant minder events after that. And then Colonel Halt, again, part of that incident, had an interrogation event on night 3 and had knowledge. He admitted to me personally, he had knowledge about the other military abduction that had happened later. And he talked to me privately and told me I was correct about that. He also had a specific minder experience with a minder I've had many dealings with. That's a covert human, involved in the intelligence community, etc. Just a week after the case had happened, back in 1980. Now the case didn't go, public till years later. But 1 week after it happened, one of these infamous Minder characters ended up calling him, and he knew details of the experience, details that no one knew. The base was on complete shutdown. Nobody was talking. And Halt said this gentleman knew details of the event. And he said, I had no idea, how this guy could have gotten any information. The base was on complete shutdown. So it showed that this guy was truly a deep insider. And he's someone that keeps coming up repeatedly in the UFO field as well. So, and then again, military cases. John Vasquez, he wrote a book about his experiences. I'm forgetting the name right now. I should include the book titles here. In the future, I'll fix this slide because I'm often forgetting them. But he was abducted during an ET military operation, subsequently as well. So he, and his case is extremely similar to Niara Isley's experience. But he was on a military, in the military, doing a military exercise. There were ETs involved, or at least craft involved. And all of a sudden, it switches gears and becomes a military abduction. And he has days of missing time, etc. Okay. Vance Davis, very famous, missing time and used for ET information and also in a communication role. Andrew, I'll just give his first name, abducted during an ET-related operation as well, very similar to the other gentleman. James Bartley, abducted during an ET-related military operation and subsequently throughout his life. He's very famous as a milab that has gone public about his experiences. And as I'm sitting here seeing his name on here, he recently contacted me to interview me for a new radio show he has, or maybe it's not new, but for a radio show. And I got to get back to him. But I'm seeing this going, wow, here I have his name right here. And he knows I consider him one of my milab cases, and I think he considers me one of his. We both do research in the field, so I'm not alone in this field by any means. Okay, so then Allison and a military family member. Allison had a military family. Her father was in the military growing up and all throughout her teens and early 20s, and they moved around between multiple military bases all over the world. And as a family had, so not only were they in the military, but had military abductions while on those bases, and alien abductions as well. Michael Prince, also known as James Casbolt, really controversial character, just one of many examples of being recruited from the military. So recruited while in the military to serve specifically as a super soldier or specifically in an ET related role, recruited directly out of the military. Todd Michael, again, in the military, was recruited because of his psychic abilities to be used in various programs for his psychic abilities to interface with ETs and as a super soldier. And Brett, another gentleman, used as a milab perpetrator against his will. I've actually had more than one individual who was an abductee who got recruited into programs against their will, and then used as part of the perpetrator team. In other words, a group of people conducting the milab abductions, and he found himself as one of the perpetrators. So now he's not the abduction victim, now he's actually one of the people doing it. And very, very upset about it, has worked very hard to remove himself from the program. I just met another individual just recently in the same boat who worked extremely hard to remove themselves from the program, and had a family member who knew a US congressman who actually went to that congressman to have him removed from the program. It's an amazing story. And so it's certainly not the first time I've heard it, but it's more of a rare thing to have to go through extreme lengths to get yourself removed from that program. Next is the recruitment programs, which I've already mentioned. So in MilLabs, there's this, what I call this developmental curve. So it can start, for instance, you see the red I have on there is ET abduction. Most people in the abduction community realize abduction, your involvement starts before your abduction, if I can clarify. For instance, starting to the far left of this curve, there's alien contact through all history. Certainly, if you're familiar with the Ancient Aliens TV show, they get big into that. Going back all the way into ancient times, coming all the way forward, there's been constant alien contact with the planet, and as well as with the governments or structures of the planet. Then this gets kind of into some more spiritual and esoteric parts, consciousness parts, but most abductees do feel that they had a past life agreement to being an abductee, so that if you can go back to your past lives. And then there's genealogical ET and government involvement. That means it is well known in abduction research that abductions run in families. This is the most common scenario. You're an ET abductee, you find out it happened to your parents, it happened to your grandparents, maybe even great-grandparents. You have children, it happens to them. You have grandchildren, it happens to them. It is very common now in abduction research to go back 3 and 4, even 4 generations. I even know of 2 cases that do go back 5 generations. But 4 generations of abductees in the same family is extremely common now in abduction research. And it's becoming more and more common as the years go by, obviously. As more abductees are having kids, or more abductees are having grandkids. So it's becoming very, common. So after there's that genealogical going back in your family and, involvement, then there can be UFO sightings and or psychic contact with ETs, again, before you even had an ET abduction. So a lot of ET abductees realize by the time they've had an abduction scenario, they've already had multiple UFO sightings in their lives and or psychic contact with ETs. So that's very common. Then after you have an ET abduction, so again, ET abductions don't start with the abduction in somebody's life. It can go into past lives, it can go into their family, it can go into previous other forms of contact, psychic and or sightings. Okay, so then after you have an ET abduction, you have threats or warnings. You could start with the harassing phone calls, intimidating phone calls, just clicks and stuff on your phone can start, but then it can increase, and then you can go into black helicopter harassment and being followed, being monitored, the vans parked outside your house, all those kind of things. So it can start off low-key and then increase in the surveillance and harassment. Then it can ramp up again. You can have men in black or government agent visits and the minder scenarios. You're befriended by insiders. Maybe guys in suits come to your front door, come to where you work. Classic MIB experiences, etc. All these kind of things. Direct interaction with government agents of some type or insiders of some type. Then you can have the military abduction and see aliens with military together. And so just ramping up. Then you can have re-abductions with medical research. So this is, you have a military abduction, but they're doing medical stuff with you. You can then have, dropping down to the one below here, life manipulation and ongoing mind control. And then you can have a re-abduction where you're, again, military abduction, but this time is to be interrogated about what you know about the ETs, about what you know about the propulsion or the navigation or the, I don't know what's vibrating. I hope you guys aren't hearing that. Okay, something else. So it can ramp up to that, the interrogations. Then you can be used in psi development, testing and drilling for your psychic or psi, functioning abilities. Remote viewing, psychokinesis, manipulating matter with your mind. Obviously, as I said, remote viewing, telekinesis, this kind of thing. Then you can be used in military drills, like military training exercises, war, games, that kind of stuff. You can be sat at a computer and asked to interface in a, war game scenario, that kind of thing. Then it can ramp up to being an ET liaison and doing mediation with an ET. This is ET communication. They know that the abductees have that ability to interact with the ETs. We do the telepathy very easily. So a lot of times these covert humans will use you in a mediation role or as a liaison in ET communication. Many of those military on military cases I talked about have that very thing go on. And then you can have military space travel. For instance, the secret space program. You can be used in space travel, and jump rooms and all those kind of things come up. You can be used as an ET spy. You can be used to spy on the ETs. That actually happened to me. I was used to, where I was given a post-hypnotic suggestion in an abduction to retain certain kinds of technical information that if I should see it again. Then I had, at a later date, a military abduction where they then, using drug and hypnosis, had me recover what I had seen in technology that they'd asked me to look for. So in that case, they were using me to spy on ET technology. I know it sounds just absolutely wild, but that is what happened in that experience. Online, I have, and maybe when we're done, I'll provide a connection to an in-depth interview that someone did of me specifically all about that experience. And it's like an hour and 45-minute interview where I talk only about that experience. So I have an in-depth, accounting of the story. ET spy, side jobs, recruitment, you can be used as a remote viewer, et cetera, et cetera. This has absolutely happened to many people. You can then, as I just gave an example earlier, be used as a milab perpetrator. So in this case, you're an alien abductee who starts having the milab stuff, you get recruited into a program, and next thing you know, you're involved in, as one of the perpetrators of it. Once I realized that was going on and I had some of these individuals come forward to me, I then realized, well, wait a second, if I have a military abduction, some of those guys may be in there against their will, not fully on board. They themselves are victims, and it gave me a different insight into who's perpetrating this. But some of them are sadistic guys that like what they're doing as well. So I've seen both. I've heard from one insider that actually enjoyed doing it, but all the others I've heard from did not. So there you go. And then that gets into the next thing, which is part of what I'm talking about, which is super soldiers. Then you can be used as a soldier in an ET war scenario. As crazy as it sounds, I've had many cases of that. And then you can be used in time travel type events, and then repeat activation. So at any point, you can kind of be reinserted on this curve. So at any point, you're revisiting all parts of this. So it's not like you just keep going up, up, up. You can at any point go back and have any of these things happen. What are Melinda's experiences? Okay, I've had many harassment and surveillance experiences. I've had black helicopter incidents, phone incidents, threats made to me, minder scenarios, and I've influenced to harm myself. I'll get into that in just a minute, a little bit later. So there's military re-abductions and alien and military combined experiences. In 1990, two roommates of mine witnessed married men. Now these are two roommates at the time who were woken during the night by, and they shared this with me later, military men, they said, shouting orders at me in the middle of the night. I had no memory of this. They were woken up by this. They said I was crying and pleading, no, I don't want to do this, I don't want to go. And yet they said they, were woken up by what sounded like very friendly guys giving me like military orders, and my kind of arguing with them and crying and saying, I don't want to do this. And that was in early 1990. In July 27, 1990, I had missing time while driving with two friends. We had a very standard ET abduction. We were driving on a mountain road. The three of us were removed from the car. If you're very familiar with alien abduction, it would sound very familiar. But all three of us saw on board the ship a man in naval uniform also present, as if he was there, not as another abductee, but as if he was there monitoring what was going on, as if he had been allowed to be on the ship and watch the alien abduction and to monitor it. And he seemed very out of place, but we all saw him there. July 21st, 93, I had a gynecological medical procedure performed by humans in an underground facility, the hazmat clean room environment. Again, I'll get a little more into that. I was, November 23rd, 93, I was flown on a human-built triangular ship. So a triangle ship with a TR-3B or whatever, I was flown on that. I witnessed miscommunication and screw-ups. There was a huge miscommunication, I think a screw-up, or it was meant to appear that way to me. I can't rule that out. Drugs were administered, and I was interrogated extensively about ET technology. Again, this November 23rd, 93 experience is the one that I did an hour and 45-minute long interview specifically about in depth. So it's pretty heavy duty, but I go into the whole experience on a YouTube video. Okay, so mid-1990s, I experienced with a friend while traveling here in Sedona. I wasn't living here yet. I live in Sedona, Arizona now. But this was back in the mid-90s. I traveled here with a friend. Her and I had come here a couple times. And our car was stopped. But we were out near one of the canyon areas. And our car was stopped by military personnel. And I was escorted away from my friend. She was made to sit in the car the whole time until they returned me to the car. And so she said for about an hour, she just sat there, and then they brought me back. I had no memory of this. Over time, I've started to get little tiny pieces of memory, but I don't really know what happened. I have not fully recalled it. But when she first told me, I knew we'd had the missing time, and I had no memory, and yet she had remembered that I'd been removed from the car and was very clear about that. In the late 90s, I had an interrogation, was threatened with a gun put to my head in a military tent on a military base in the California desert. So yeah, what can I say? Gun put to my head, and they said, stop talking about it. So that's what that was about. August 20th, 2000. And by the way, you think, oh, why is she talking about this then? Well, I've remained very public because people I know who get really deeply involved in this, such as I have been and others, they'll say, how do I make it stop? And I say, go very public. That is the one way that's demonstrated and guaranteed to make it stop. When you first go public, they'll pick it up just a little. They'll may increase just a little bit, but if you remain public, then they leave you alone because I think you become too much of a security risk. If they do anything to you, you're immediately going to go public with it, go public with the evidence. And so it seems to be the one thing that really works. So on August 20th, 2000, I was abducted with a friend out of her apartment, and we were both taken to an underground base. Both of us were interrogated, threatened, and we saw a reptilian with the military. And we have photo evidence of the break-in to the home. I'll show that in a bit. November 15th, 2011, I was abducted with 4 friends out of a friend's house in Sedona, Arizona. So this was just back in 2011. Taken to an underground base as participants in a very mass milab event, just like there can be mass alien abductions with large groups of people. You know, once you have 2 or more, it's considered a mass alien abduction event. But some of those have 20, 30, 50, 100 people in them. Quite a few. There's some famous cases of like 100 people taken at once. I was part of the mass alien abduction from the Hotel del Coronado in Coronado, California. That's the San Diego, Southern California area. And 15 of us were taken from the Hotel Del. 2 different books have been written about that. The last one by famous abduction researcher Yvonne Smith. And I have a whole chapter about my involvement in that alien abduction, in that Coronado event. But you can also have mass milab events. So, so we were, in this case, my friend and I, taken as participants, my friends. So there were actually 4 friends plus me, so 5 people from my friend's house, involving militaries and ET together. And we were taken to an underground base, tested for psi abilities, specifically moving matter with our mind, psychokinesis. And I later, 2 years later, met another abductee who was here visiting in town, wanted to talk to me about his alien abductions. We met twice. On the second visit, he shared with me a milab event. He knew the date and everything. It turns out he was also one of the people in this mass event. So of the other 100 abductees, the 5 of us taken together all remember, and here 2 years later, an individual that I meet shares with me a milab event here, and it's the same event. He was one of the other people in that same event. And that was incredible verification and evidence for me, just incredible that I met someone who was one of the other people there. Ever since that, I've wondered if I'm going to meet anybody else who was part of this event here in town or from outside of town, and I have not. But I was so grateful that I met him. He shared his experience. I had never talked about this, never gone public. He shared this with me like he thought that I thought he was nuts, you know, like he was worried that I was going to think he was crazy. And he shared this thing with me and goes in depth, and he's explaining the experience that myself and my friends, the 5 of us, all remember. And yet he's relating the same event in every detail clearly, and he even knew the date. He was clearly part of it. It blows my mind that I met him. So thank God, because that was incredible verification. Okay, so May 18, 2013, I was in a group milab experience during a Super Soldier Summit conference in Henderson, Nevada. So this is right outside of Vegas, part of Vegas, and at a major hotel. And a group of us, 15 to 20 of us, were taken together from there, and it included a psi or memory enhancement procedures that were performed on some of the conference presenters, and others involved perceived this as some type of training op for the perpetrators. So we think this was to train the perpetrators, and we were just used as guinea pigs for that. But it's very, very detailed. Not everyone has come forward remembering. About 5 or 6 of us remember it, at least bits and pieces. So about 5 of those involved remember it. Okay. Ongoing, or maybe even 6. Okay, so number 10, ongoing and recently repeating minder scenarios. To this day, I have constant minder involvement, big time, huge, really huge. So it goes on constantly. Okay, so, and that means befriended by insiders who are very interested in my experiences. And yeah, say the least. Okay, so what are my experiences? Here's just some quick pictures. This is an ET abduction when I was taken with the 2 friends while driving over a mountain highway. An artist friend did this for me many, many, many years ago. The ship was actually much bigger than that, but that's just a quick little idea of it. Here we are on board. Now what's not drawn here, because at the time when I had the artist drew this, I did not tell him about the military guy in the background. I thought it seemed too incredible, and I just wanted a drawing of the ET abduction. But now I wish I had the gentleman draw the man in uniform, because to the right, over to the side, was the man in uniform watching the procedure. But unfortunately, I didn't have to draw it. Okay, what are my experiences? I've been shown ET technology in my alien abductions many, many times. Navigation, propulsion, computer, blah, blah, blah. So, and that's one thing that the covert abductors are very interested in. So here's right after an ET abduction, drawing an ET craft propulsion system by me, and then famous technical aviation artist Mark McCandlish drew the picture on the right for me of the. So I've been interrogated a bunch of times about this kind of technology. I was flown, now you guys, this is a fake picture, but I just included it because the craft I saw was bigger, but it's very similar. But this has been known to be a very fake picture. But I was flown on a large human-built triangle craft. And of course, I've been taken to an underground base. There's my picture of that again. And then this is my drawing on the left, drawn within 48 hours, maybe even 24 hours, within 24 hours of my hazmat experience. I drew the picture on the left completely from memory. Artist Bill McDonald interviewed me about it, saw my drawing, and as well as interviewed me extensively to draw the drawing on the right, which is very accurate. That's me on the table, obviously. I don't have anything on, so hence only these down. And the 2 guys in hazmat outfits. There are actually multiple people, men and women, in hazmat outfits. The time that I was taken here in Sedona with the friends, we were tested for psychokinesis abilities, moving matter with our mind, and they had us hooked up with wires just like this, getting the I must say EKG, is that it? You know, getting the brain frequency monitoring. And that, even though there were like 100 people in the experience, they took us in a room in groups of about 10. And I don't think all 10, but I want to say anywhere from 6 to 8, maybe about 8 people at a time, had this wire cap put over their head with these wires hanging down, just like this. And there was a bank of computers, and they had us moving objects with our mind. It was predominantly humans, but there were some ETs also present, kind of assisting. And the ETs were assisting us to do this. And they were testing for your psi abilities. There's more than that, but that's basically without going into great detail. This is when I was taken from the Super Soldier Summit in 2013. A large group of us, at least 15 people that we're aware of, were taken. The military abductors, some of them they didn't have guns, but they were dressed like this gentleman in the top right, camouflage and a tan t-shirt. Some of them were wearing plain clothes, it's kind of a long story, and some of them were wearing this dependent on their role and what they were doing. We were taken down to the receiving dock of the hotel in the middle of the night. They'd obviously done some agreement with security to shut off the cameras, you know, obviously. I don't think you'd be able to do this now, but back in 2013. And because of the shootings that happened in Vegas and everything, I don't think they would even allow this now. But back then, I guess they had some agreement. Somebody was paid off. God only knows. But there was this Ryder truck, and there's some debate of whether there were two. I only remember one. But this big truck, that's a moving truck here in the U.S. Ryder's a typical moving company where you can rent the trucks and, you know, move your home, your apartment, or business, whatever. And the back of the Ryder truck pulled up to the dock, and the receiving dock door to the outside was closed, and so it was, you know, enclosed. But they this truck up at this point. You know, you think it's just like a regular Ryder moving truck, no big deal. But on the inside, it looked like these two lower procedures. Now, the middle one is the outpatient surgical unit one, and the bottom right is a surgical medical facility set up in the back of a truck. So that's actually, I think it's a facility for some kind of rescue and recovery operation thing, and I found it online. But you can see that is in the back of a truck, and so it did look just like that, except for there wasn't one chair, there were 3, and anyways, but that's what we were taken into. Once we were taken down to the dock, we didn't go anywhere, we were just in the back of the truck having some procedures done. So what are my experiences on, this is just, I'm gonna read through one quickly. I think this is about that one. I just have a quick little story of it here. So on Monday, May 20th, 2013, I woke in my hotel room at this conference with stopped up sinuses and blew my nose to find a slight amount of blood and new scab-like material. Actually, not a ton, but a little bit. And also scab-like material. And I thought, what is going on? That I'm like stopped up and blowing out dried up stuff, you know. That morning while in the shower, I noticed bruises on my forearms. I wondered how I got them, and it crossed my mind that there may have been some sort of experience since I couldn't account for them. I shared a room with a friend, I'll just call her S for now, who had come to the conference with me. I showed her the bruises, and while they weren't very dark, she saw them clearly. So she said, oh my God, you have bruises all over you. Then at the conference, another speaker, who I'll call E, attending, first mentioned to me, like that later that evening, the possible experience. So on Monday, and she mentioned to me a possible experience, and I had immediate recall. I was immediately remembering what happened, and so was she. So we started a discussion, and we were both remembering. It was like the next day. It was the next evening. It had happened the night before. E then showed me photos of a broken safety latch on a speaker's hotel room door. And she said that Jay, one of the gentlemen there, another speaker, that his door latch was broken in the same way, but there was no photos of it. So 2 of the hotel room doors showed damage to the door latches, very clear, very extensive damage. And the conference producer of this event was later billed for the damage to 2 of his speaker room doors because the hotel had assumed, of course they would, that those 2 speakers did something to damage their doors. They tried to break in each other's rooms, something, but they blamed the conference producer, and the conference producer has the paperwork, you know, as evidence that she was billed, that they were billed for the damage to the doors. Okay, I had a visceral reaction when E, that's her name, you know, told me something that had happened. And I told her about the bruises on my arm and my bloody nose that morning. I showed her my forearm bruising. When she told me she had many bruises, she showed me the same ones on her arm. Her and I had the exact same bruising on our arms. And of course, we were in separate hotel rooms, even on separate floors. But we both recalled being taken. We both had the same bruising. The night of the event, I was woken by the hotel room door opening. So this is recall the event. Hotel door room opening and 2 men entered. There was some kind of electronic pulse with a snapping sound that was keeping my friend S, you know, and I both asleep. They had to shake me very hard many times to wake me. I think that was to override this pulsing sound. And then again to get me to stay awake. My friend remained sound asleep. The only light in the room was from the hallway outside, and it took my eyes a few moments to adjust. E, my other friend, had told me, the other speaker, had told me we were taken into a yellow van. But I had remembered it was a yellow Ryder truck and did not tell her that during that initial conversation. Then on the phone at a much later date, many weeks later, E called me and she brought up that Jay, one of the guys involved, said we were in a yellow Ryder truck. Again, I had never told anybody. So when she calls me and says, that van we remember, Jay and some other guys say it was definitely a yellow Ryder truck. She said this without my having said anything about what I had remembered about the truck. This blew me away that anyone else had remembered the truck, and apparently multiple people did. So it wasn't just me. During the experience, there was a shot given in my armpit, and we were very drugged. I found a scab there the next morning upon showing, so my friend, my hotel roommate, my friend, she said it looked like a needle mark next to my armpit. She said, you have a scab of a needle mark. In the experience, I had a long, very thin, tiny drill put up my left nostril, and it was not an implant. I remember saying, ouch, 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 like the pain felt like when you get brain freeze from eating something, you know, way too cold, right? And you get so I just said, okay, the drill went crunch, crunch as it broke through 2 layers of bone. The drill was followed by a thin wire that seemed to have some kind of electronic pulse. I remember someone saying to me about electronic stimulation of the ocular or retina, so that's your ocular nerve, and visual retention, as well as electrical pulse. I thought it was some kind of electrical stimulation of the visual cortex or nerve. They repeated phrases like, you will and you will not, and you will do as we say, and you will not remember this. Also, this is your life now, and this is who you are now. They also said something along the lines of, you remain alive because we want you to be, and only because we want you to be, and to know that. So that was, you know, obviously a threat, a veiled threat, like, you know, don't blow it. Okay. So obviously some mind control stuff there. Okay. Since the experience, or after the experience, I felt that somehow my visual memory retention was enhanced somehow and not destroyed. Was it an increased memory, specific memory, psychic vision? Was it for remote viewing enhancement? Maybe. Truth is, I don't know. And what did they want me to see? Again, I don't know. I think we were upgraded in some way, although by force and with some pain, obviously. I thought I also heard them say increased visual retention and decreased the filters. So something to increase my ability to remember, I guess. Okay. My best evidence for this experience was that I had extreme sinus problems, bloody noses, breathing difficulties, sleeping problems, panic attacks, and post-traumatic stress disorder related to the event for many months afterwards. For many months, I had a rough time sleeping, all sorts of panic attacks, all sorts of sleeping problems, multiple bloody noses, like the week after the event. And so, you know, something had clearly happened. Occasionally I still do that, or this event also triggered past events. I should take off that bottom because I need to just update this. Luckily, I still don't have a problem from this, but for many months afterwards, I did. Okay, what is the evidence for ET abduction? Well, most of you probably know this. Now, this isn't about milab. This is straightforward ET, but there's, for instance, needle marks, like this guy had one under his fingernail in an ET abduction. Obviously, the infamous scoop marks. This is one case, both of these examples, but a scoop mark on his leg. That is my scoop mark on the left after the next day after an ET abduction. It's rather large, and that happened. I was driving home on a trip and had an ET abduction while driving home, and the very next day had that large scoop mark, and that's how it appeared the next day, a healed scar. And it was about almost an inch long and about a quarter inch wide. This is a gentleman who had a scoop mark on his neck after it appeared the next day after an ET abduction. So an ET abduction, boom, cookie hole, you know, what do you call it? Cookie cutter hole, sorry, cookie cutter hole on his neck. This is another abductee who had marks that appeared on their hand immediately after an abduction. That is like a little kind of burn mark. This is a similar thing, evenly spaced little burn marks going up an abductee's leg from their ankle up past their knee, evenly spaced. Evidence for abduction, obviously implants removed. These are both from the late Dr. Roger Lear. And see the little wires and protrusions coming off of that one. They seem to integrate with the person's, let me try to say, nerve system in their body, wherever the implant is. And some are silk-colored glass-like material, some are metallic. He found that they had off-Earth isotope ratios, and they went to really advanced nanotechnology labs and discovered that some of these implants had really, really advanced nanotechnology. So off-Earth isotope ratios in the metals and advanced nanotechnology in the implants. Evidence for ET abduction, obviously corroborating stories of abductees. Many abductees taken together who are unaware of each other's experiences and yet remembering. This is my drawing I worked really, really hard on. This is my drawing for the Coronado book for Yvonne Smith, but that's from the Coronado abduction event. And they're little short grays, some elder grays, and a couple of mantis beings in that. Photos and videos. This is from Stan Romanek, but I believe this is to be legitimate. He left his camera in his room. You know, many people do. They'll leave their camera out. Okay, his camera just happens to be sitting out in his room one night. He has an abduction. The next morning, he finds the camera hanging from the ceiling fan in his dining room. So in his dining room, the camera is hanging by a strap from the ceiling fan. He's like, how did that get there? And his wife says, his wife is no longer with him, but at the time said that, yes, this was true, Lisa. And this, there were a couple pictures on the camera. This was one of them. And they say it's an ET selfie. I believe this to be legitimate. I get a vibe from this, that this is probably real. There's something about the eyes at the top, eyes and mouth, obviously. So if it is real, it's an ET selfie. Truth is, we don't know for sure, but. Okay, and that's just, you know, there's many, many types of evidence and pictures and film footage and stuff that abductees have achieved. A lot of times unsuccessfully, but a lot of times successfully. Okay. Evidence for milabs, the evidence for covert-ops involvement. There's bruises and needles, so I'm just going to run through these really fast. Bruises and needle marks, medical symptoms, telephone interruptions, mail tampering, being followed in your car, photos of agents and vehicles. I showed you some. Break-ins with photos or documents missing. You know, obviously police reports of break-ins. Direct in-person confrontations. Eyewitnesses to the abductions or the harassment surveillance. So you can have an eyewitness to your events. Photos and videos of helicopter flybys. Obviously lots of photos and videos of black helicopter. Drugged with medical lab tests afterwards showing you were drugged. I have a couple of cases of that I know of, or I talked to or worked with. being watched or followed, seeing installation or location where you were taken, and later verifying its existence, and verifying the existence of an underground or above ground military base, matching your story to other underground base research, obviously insiders and minders, confirmation of your case via befriending you or threatening you, obviously is confirming the reality of your thing, or they wouldn't be befriending you, giving you information, and or threatening you if it wasn't real. Okay. Sound recordings by the abductees of their milab events and videos. I know of a couple of people that have done this. One case, he put a voice-activated recorder in his environment and recorded some of his milab experiences with a voice-activated recorder. It's very interesting. There's clearly military guys talking to each other. They sound like military. And waking him up, and he caught it all on tape. It's amazing. What is the evidence for milabs? Obviously, so this is just some quick things. Black helicopter photos, another black helicopter photo, video footage. A guy I knew who was a sheriff in Northern California of 3 counties, head sheriff for 3 counties. His brother's visiting him. They have a milab event. The military abductor leans against the wall and puts his foot up on the wall. This is the boot print on the wall from the military boot print. And luckily had the presence of mind to photograph it. And so that is the boot print part of near the toes and the heel of the military abductor leaning against the wall. This is the broken door latch in that hotel of the experience that I had in Nevada, taken from that conference. And this is you can see the lock is pulled out and one screw is missing. It actually was on the floor. It was found on the floor, and the lock is pulled out. And this damage actually happened to 2 of the hotel room doors. And like I said, the conference producer was billed for the damage to both doors, replacement of all the locks and door handle on both doors. But this is the only one that a photo was taken of. One gentleman, again, this is my guy in Northern California, who's the sheriff in 3 counties. In one of his experiences, he got in an argument with the guard, and he was punched in the stomach. The guard he got in an argument with waited till others had left the room and punched him in the groin, and he developed a hernia in his groin area, long story short, anyway, so this is the medical report and picture of the gentleman's hernia achieved in that event. One abductee had various needle marks, and so he gave me some pictures of them. One on the end of a finger, a couple on the back of one big one on the back of the leg with a bruise around it, 3 little needle marks in a triangle formation. A burn mark in his mouth, a needle mark on his lip, more needle marks on his lip, a needle or burn thing up in his nose. Anyways, poor guy. Lots of stuff there. What is the evidence for milabs? More evidence of covert involvement. So I talked about being befriended by insiders. They may offer you some assistance. In Diary of an Abduction by Angela Thompson Smith, PhD, she said the individual is befriended by a, quote, minder. So she coined that term. I give her credit for that in her book, Diary of an Abduction. And said this person has links with the government or military, especially with any of the intelligence agencies or government medical contractors. One abductee was told by their minder that they were involved in ufology to derail the train. Abductees share a catching of military intelligence people who are suddenly involved in their life, and just skipping ahead, they give them nicknames. Nicknames that some of them have been given are ex-bulldog, Destiny Man, and I call one of mine Colonel Fate. I have a new one, and I should come up with a nickname for him, but I have ex-bulldog, Destiny Man, Colonel Fate. Going back to Colonel Hall of the Bentwaters instance told me that he had been called by one of these individuals within 1 week in 1980 of the Bentwaters incident, and the individual knew all about it, and this was long before anything had ever come out publicly about it. The base was under tight security and lockdown over this, and yet one of these gentlemen one of these same guys listed above, called him and knew every detail about the event. So these interactions serve as confirmation and validation for the abductees, obviously. I've had covert involvement with minders. I could go on and on, but you know, I don't want to take up that time right now. But I've had experiences repeatedly over the years. Here's a conversation with one of them. I said to him, when you so he showed up in my office here at the Center for New Age one day. It happens to be where I'm sitting right now. And years later, I've had ongoing contact with him. So I said, when you showed up in my office that day, I wondered if that was by chance. He said, quoting him, the answer is hell no. I then said, thank you for that. Thank you for saying that right then. And I, in a long sigh, I said, I recorded this. And because it was a conversation, he allowed me to record with him. And I said, thank you for that confirmation. Later, much later, I brought up more times another conversation where he also said, hell no, where I said, again, I want to revisit that. There was no chance, you know. And he said, of course it wasn't a chance meeting. I said, why did you come to my office that day? And there was a long pause before his answer, and he said, that's for further conversation. So we've never had the conversation to this day where he was going to explain why he suddenly showed up. But he did suddenly show up at my office one day and start communication with me. Evidence from my experiences, quite a bit. I'll just run through some of these real quick. Vapor monitor that I saw and experienced was verified. Helicopter witnesses, helicopter harassment witnesses, phone interruptions witnesses, a red hair interrogator that I saw seen by other people. He comes up from time to time in these experiences. Military uniforms I've seen, I verified as existing. Bruises with photos of those bruises. Equipment and technology seen, verified as existing. Medical, surgical procedures performed. I don't know anything about medical stuff, but ran some procedures by other people who do, doctors and whatnot, and they verified those procedures as being, authentic procedures that I knew nothing about, but they were medical procedures. Location of base and description verified by 4 insiders. Again, I need to update this slide because it's not 4 insiders. I've now had 6 different people verify a particular military base I was taken to, an underground base. Kind of part of it's above ground, a lot of it's underground. And I've now had 6 individuals over like a 20-year span, independent of each other. When I describe the location, I've had 6 different guys, true insiders, no military backgrounds, no super soldier background, whatever, immediately tell me where I was. And I'll say the same thing, that they'd been there and they knew where it was. So alphanumeric insignia seen, verified by an insider. A unique gun that I saw, verified by an insider, and many repeated scenarios, etc. So here's bruising on my leg, not a very good picture, but you can see bruising on my thigh there after one such event. Here's a different experience with some bruising up on my leg there, down on my calf, multiple bruises. Again, that's the same picture of the calf, but then an arm, right there I was. This was many years ago, I'm younger in the picture, obviously. So, but a guard was escorting me down a hallway, and he had a grip on my arm, kind of like this, if you can see up in my little live picture. And he had this hard grip, and he was holding me really tightly while escorting me, and that's what left those marks on my arm. He was holding me very, very tightly. He wanted me to walk with him and stay with him, and that's the bruising there on my arm. Same experience where I had bruises also on the back of my leg. And this is when my friend and I were taken out of her house in San Diego, out of her apartment. The both of us were taken together. We're both alien abductees, and we were both taken together by the military out of her apartment. And they came in wearing night vision goggles attached to helmets. The helmet in this picture is a flight helmet. It wasn't like that. It was more like what I would say like a smaller, tight little helmet like an MP would wear, military police helmet or something, but it had night vision goggles on it, much like that, so that's very similar. This is the damage they did to the door. Now, 1 week before this event, her landlord had the front doors painted and the trim around them and had new weather stripping put in. So here's the undamaged side of the door on the right that shows the painted seams, the wood trim, and the foam weather stripping. On the left is the other side, which was damaged, the same door, you know, but the other side. And you can see where a sharp object was put in that painted seam of wood, and the painted seam was pulled apart by a sharp object. We had a private investigator look at this, and he said this is a professional break-in by someone who knows how to break into a door, because the door had its door handle lock as well as a deadbolt. And he said, when you're a pro, you loosen the door frame and the whole thing pushes open. So that's what someone had done. They had loosened the door frame and were easily able to get into the apartment in the middle of the night. This is the damaged door lock area. Again, this was new weather stripping the week before and new paint. So you can see all the chipped paint around the lock and the chipped paint on the wood and torn weather stripping. All that happened the night of the event, and that's the damage around the deadbolt lock, or one of them's the door lock, one of them's the deadbolt. Anyways, but there you go. And that was all new like a week before. My hazmat experience back, that's a separate experience, but back when that happened in '93, I ended up working for a medical company for a while, and one day saw a big supply catalog. And I was sitting manning a phone, so I was just flipping through the supply catalog, like something to do. And I came across this picture. It's actually the cover of one of the catalogs. And this kind of opaque, flesh-colored, Crayola crayon flesh tone, if I say that, colored plastic was draping, a tented area, a clean room environment in the catalog. And you can see his arm behind it there on the left, and it's opaque. And that is exactly what the draping in the room looked like. It was opaque, and it was kind of this pinky tan or flesh tone, kind of color, just like that. Now, I did research in that catalog. When anything in that catalog had that coating on it, it was antimicrobial, which made perfect sense, given that I had a medical procedure in this tenant environment with guys in clean suits. Now, the clean suits were white Tyveks, just like the guys wearing in the picture on the left, but white Tyveks and hoods and air hoses, etc. But the tenting in the room looked just like that picture, and I was blown away when I saw that. And to me, it was evidence, because the microbial coating, what a weird thing to find that in that catalog and be able to explain what I saw with the tenting, and the tinting on it, the color of the plastic had that same color tint, showing the microbial. And then they were all wearing this device. I found that in a supply catalog. And it's called an organic vapor monitor, and it measures exposure in demanding and high humidity environments, especially suited for certain things, ideal for specialized applications. When they had me in this tented room with these guys in clean suits, they filled the whole room with this mist that landed on me, made me, kind of wet all over and made everything moist. And it smelled like, to me, later, like Bactine, which is a disinfectant for wounds and whatnot. I think the whole room had been sprayed down with this intense disinfectant to create a very sterile environment, and that they all had these, I didn't know what these black things on their waist were, but later when I researched, I found this picture and realized that is what they had on their waist. And here's a description from one of the catalogs. So again, that matched my experience. So why is all this happening? Well, this is what I've come across. They're interested in, so the covert intelligence guys are interested in ET motives and the agenda. So they're going to interview or interrogate the abductee about alien agenda and motives. They're interested in ET and abductee genetics. What do we know? Do we have ET genetics, or have our genetics as abductees been altered or changed. They're interested in ET and abductee psi abilities. What are our psychic abilities? Have they been enhanced by the ETs? Can we perform them willingly? Can we perform them repeatedly, et cetera, et cetera? So they are very interested in that. They're interested in the development and practice of mind control. Of course, they're using all sorts of mind control procedures on us in these military abduction events, and they're obviously practicing and developing those kind of procedures. So we're, you know, instant targets for that and have that kind of stuff going. Okay. And we're sitting targets in the experience, and that we can be used in that way. There's mental interface or psi operation of ET technology. So the mental interface means, you know, connecting with the technology with your mind. This is how the ET technology operates. Most abductees, if they've been sat at a computer or controls or navigation system, propulsion system on a ship, they learn that all they have to do is think it. They visualize where they're going, the ship goes there. They think what they want it to do, it does that. There's a response mentally. So this is one thing that the covert abductors are extremely interested in. Of course, we have crash retrievals, back engineered technology, and probably a lot of it requires this kind of psi mental operation to be able to function. And of course, if the abductees are able to do that, they want to know what we're able to do, how to do it, and how they can apply it to our technology. So along with everything else about the technology, of course, they're interested in the technology itself. Have we operated, seen it? Do we know how it functions? You know, can we build it, recreate it, draw diagrams, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. But they also want to know, are we able to operate it using these mental abilities? Okay. What does the covert-ops ET information management people want to reverse engineering? So this was the title of this talk. They are reverse engineering the abductees, just like we pick up and recover an extraterrestrial craft, they pick up and recover abductees. Okay? So they want to reverse engineer the abductees. Well, here's a whole list. So I'll just run through it really quick. They want to know what makes us an abductees and why the ETs are interested in us. Obviously, a big part of that is the genetics. What is about our genetics that interests the ETs? Have we had genetic enhancements been made? What do we know about ET motives or the ET agenda? What mind control procedures can they learn, develop, or practice on us? What are psi paranormal abilities? Have they been enhanced? Can we perform them at will? How do we do ET psi like telepathy and psychokinesis? What are mental abilities? Have they been enhanced? What have the ETs told us, shown us, or taught us? As in math and language. A lot of abductees get shown math, mathematical formulas, languages, letters, alphabets in their abduction experiences. Believe me, if you've been shown all that as an abductee, you're probably of interest to the covert humans. By the way, it's worth saying right now, I should include this as a new slide in the presentation, but I feel strongly that about 40% of alien abductees have covert involvement, and that's being conservative. Now, the free organization, the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Encounters, FREE, that organization, in all their polling of over 4,000 participants, asked a few milab questions, but to me, they asked the wrong questions. I've talked to them about that. But even asking the wrong questions, they came up with about 12% of their polling. But they were specifically asking, have you been abducted by the military? That's one of the questions. Well, no, that discounts any people that were abducted by aliens but saw military personnel present, and all the harassment, surveillance, and minder scenarios. So once you factor all that in, and I've told them, you ask the right questions, I expect strongly your response is going to be at least 40%, and that's being conservative. So this happens to a lot of abductees. Okay, so going back, number 8, what have the ETs told, shown, or taught us? Math, language, okay. What do we know about ET technology, like propulsion systems, navigation, or weapons? How do we operate the technology? Can we operate a piece that the military guys hand to us? What types of training? Because a couple of people said I was handed this thing and asked if I knew how to work it, you know. What types of training procedures can they develop from what we know? What medical info can they develop from what we know or from our bodies? How do we process and retain the ET information? How do we adapt to the ETs? How do we adapt? How are we able to function with them and get over that fear and have that interaction and, you know, the high strangeness of it? So they're very interested in that. Do we communicate with them, and can we be used by our military abductors, obviously, you know, as I said on many of the military on military cases, so people get recruited into these programs to communicate with them. How do we adapt to living with our experiences? How do we recover? How do we integrate this in our lives? How can they duplicate and apply to our human technology or to training personnel any of the stuff they've learned from us? Can some of these abductees then be recruited into technology development, engineering, ET communications, site personnel, and super soldier programs directly? So can we actually be recruited? Now, of course, very few abductees get recruited, but you know, they may be picking you up to find out and go through the discovery process to determine if you're someone that they want to use. Certainly, if you're already in the military, you're a sitting target. Okay. So all of the above equals reverse engineering the abductee. Reverse engineering the abductee is not about learning how to abduct people, although to some degree, maybe it is, hence all the practice and development of mind control. But reverse engineering the abductee is about having personnel that are able to do what abductees are able to do. No wonder my research comes across abductees used in covert-ops training procedures. Possibly they plan on using the abductees in some future scenario, but more likely to develop a training procedure vis-a-vis the abductee. Abductees are usually much too big of a risk to be used directly. We're way too unreliable, prone to go public at any minute, talkative like me, you know, and would insist on that pesky disclosure thing. And usually we don't have the military or covert ops training needed, except for when those that do, but most of us don't. Okay, face it, we're not yes men, but what we do have can possibly be taught to those kind of individuals. It appears they may be doing this regardless. Okay. In some cases, the abductee does have the needed training or background, and they are recruited or indoctrinated directly into the programs, such as, you know, technology, psi, and super soldier. More and more abductees are being seemingly recruited against their will. So this isn't all just consciously. Sometimes it's in an abduction scenario against their will and used in these programs while in an abduction scenario under duress or with the use of memory suppression. What are they reverse engineering? If reverse engineering the craft is about the technology, then reverse engineering the abductee is about the personnel. Or better yet, it's about the personnel and the technology. Because when the covert ops personnel question the abductee, they get both technical information and operational information. So isn't that interesting? They question the abductees, interrogate them, and that they're getting direct technical information, like technology we've seen, hands-on, how does it function, how does it work, da-da-da-da-da. But then they're also getting how do you operate it. Okay, so they're getting both from us. No wonder they're spending a lot of money. If you think about it, to the degree there are millions of abductees worldwide, there's research organizations that have tens of thousands of researched abduction cases in their files. If 40% of those have covert interest and 12 or 20% of that is then having the re-abduction interrogation, we're talking a whole, pardon my language, shitload of people, right? A whole lot of people. So they're obviously getting a lot of information from us, and they're obviously spending a lot of money on the program involving alien abductees. You know, some covert project has a huge black budget all about us. obviously. Okay. Another way to look at it, you need a hybrid person to operate a hybrid technology. No wonder there's also an interest in abductees' genetics. What if you got to be part ET to function this stuff? So they have this crash, retrieved, recovered technology. I mean, someone just wrote a new book, Michael Schratt wrote a new book, and I think he's saying 100 and some odd crash retrievals. I mean, you know, and those are just what we know about. I mean, and we have all this huge reverse engineering programs to develop the technology. Well, what if you need to be a little bit ET to function it? Not only in the psychic consciousness way, but literally physically. So all you know, I know another abductee that's really putting it out there now and starting to talk about all abductees are actually hybrids. We're either literally hybrids or we've been manipulated through our experiences where we're now basically hybrids. What if the covert guys already knew that? What if they knew that? So no wonder there's a covert interest in our genetics. Maybe we have to be that to operate that technology. And so they need that to operate the technology they have, or our reverse engineering, that they need that. Okay. Maybe more accurately, you need a hybrid functioning person. So you need someone who functions like a hybrid to operate a hybrid-like functioning kind of technology. Someone who's a little of both to operate technology that's a little of both. Okay. What they may be trying to achieve in 3 predominant categories as described in the experiences of the abductees. So this is what they're trying to achieve. Abductees are interrogated about ET technology. They get asked things. So these are all quotes. I'll just go through these. These are all quotes from abductees. Tell me about the dry system. How are you able to do it? They asked me about the propulsion system weapons, how the ships are flown. They asked me how the aliens maneuver the craft. They wanted me to spy for technology. They told me that they need to shoot them down. They said we need to be the upper echelon, and to be the upper echelon, you must know the technology. What do they want? Obviously technology. These are formulas drawn by an abductee from their alien abduction experiences. This is, again, Mark McCall's is drawing for me a propulsion system that I've been shown. So also, what do they want? Obviously, mind controls. Some abductees are given post-hypnotic suggestion to harm themselves or someone else. This seems to be activated if they should talk about or even think about doing anything about their experiences. Here's some quick examples. In other words, like they give you a post-hypnotic suggestion by the military abductors to stop yourself from either going public, talking to other people, that kind of thing. So here is a story. An abductee's 2 sons, one who had ET abduction experiences, one who only witnessed them happening to his other brother. We're having a discussion one day regarding the abductions, when suddenly they came to, like they snapped out of a trance while strangling each other. They're standing in their living room strangling each other. They literally had their hands around each other's throats. Prior to this discussion, they were having a quiet conversation, and they were actually in agreement. They were joking and getting along. And the event was completely unprovoked and totally out of character for the brothers that they came to while strangling each other. Scared the crap out of them, to say the least. While preparing to present at a UFO conference, this is about me, Melinda, came out of the shower when I suddenly came to with my arms outstretched and holding, so I was going to a UFO conference. I was about to travel out of town. I actually had friends coming to pick me up. We were traveling to this conference together. I was a presenter there. I suddenly came to with my arms outstretched and holding a blow dryer, air blow dryer, turned on under the running water. So I'm holding it under running water. I had no memory of, it wasn't plugged in beforehand. It was on another area of the bathroom. I had no memory of having plugged it in, turned it on, or of turning on the water. All I know is I got out of the shower, I'm drying off. Next thing I know, I come to, snap out of it, and I'm holding the blow dryer, which is on, plugged in the wall under the running water. I snapped out of it quickly. I threw the blow dryer on the bathroom counter. I stepped back, I grabbed the frame of the doorway, and I was shaking. I hadn't been shocked. So I was not shocked at all, but I quickly threw it and went, oh my God. And okay. So that's something built in to stop myself, obviously. Abductees have heard sudden thoughts that they knew weren't their own, commanding them to do things to themselves that they'd never do. So here's some quotes. Run your car off the road. Turn your car into that hill or wall. Fall down the stairs. I've heard so many abductees that they'll be walking down a staircase and all of a sudden feel like, fall down the stairs, throw your stuff down the stairs. And of course they stop and go, no, you know. One abductee was baking, took something out of the oven was already on. She got a command, stick your arm in the oven and burn it. And she started to put her arms in the oven and stopped herself and said, what the hell am I doing? So of course she didn't burn herself. What do they want? Category 3, mind control. Obviously, that's some of what I was just talking about. Many abductees have spoken to me about backing away from this subject and often use the exact same odd choice of words and phraseology. I have come to refer them as Stepford abductees. For those that don't know, there was this old movie in the 70s called The Stepford Wives. There's been a couple horrible remakes, but the original Stepford abductees. Because I suspect, due to the exact wording of their expressionless delivery, that they are being programmed to think and say these things. Of course, the abductees have absolutely no idea there's any significance to what they are saying. These are examples of what I've heard repeated word for word. I'm done. These are all from different abductees. I've decided to pull out. I should not be talking about this. I just want my life back. And I've heard it multiple times. You could say, well, that's natural for an abductee to say I'm done, or I want to pull out and I shouldn't be talking about this. But when I'm interviewing people about their milabs and they say these exact, I mean, I've had like 50 people say these exact things to me. I should not be talking about this. I just want my life back. You know, how many people have I heard say, I want my life back? Wow, okay. I'm going to focus on something else now. And the strangest one that I've heard repeated word for word from many of my cases, and this exact wording, there is no future in this for me. They've obviously been programmed to say that or think that. I mean, I've literally had multiple say, there is no future in this for me. The importance for ufology. So I say no milabs. In other words, to get to know milabs, you know disclosure. Or if you don't know milabs, no disclosure. So no milabs, no disclosure. You can see from the top line there, no milabs, no disclosure. MILAB's research ends up redefining the UFO cover-up and the policy of non-disclosure along with the abduction paradigm. There can't be a truthful official disclosure without addressing the abduction phenomenon. Hello. Let me read that again. There can't be a truthful official disclosure without, because you don't have the truth if you're not addressing the abduction phenomenon. ET abduction remains one of the prime reasons why there is a policy of non-disclosure. If this is true, it helps one to understand that a full disclosure may not be forthcoming anytime soon. You guys, we're not getting a full disclosure. Okay. We're gonna be lucky if we get a partial. And there certainly can't be disclosure without someone answering for the obviously illegal and unconstitutional actions of those involved in perpetrating these experiences in MILAB scenarios. I believe we may be able to learn a great detail about the cover-up from the milab abductees by looking at what they've been questioned about by their human abductors. And milab abductees have witnessed things in their experiences that the ET information management people are involved in. Just as the management group learns about ET tech and ET plans from the abductees. So again, the people managing ET present on Earth, the covert, secret, top secret, covert, black ops community, managing the ET interaction on Earth, managing the reverse engineering, managing the development, whoever's at the heads of it. They learn about ET tech and ET plans from the abductees and from ETs, from the, many sources. But the abductees apparently at some point were designated as sources for information, obviously. Okay, ET plans from the abductees. Just like they learn, ufologists, the ufology community may be able to get a better idea of what the manager's plans are. by carefully examining these cases. So ufology doesn't pay any attention. I feel like I beat my head against the wall. Doesn't pay any attention to milab stuff. Yet, if they did, and they said, well, what do we know about the managers? They know the managers are asking us for certain kinds of information. Obviously, they're working on those things. They're working on developing those technologies. They're working on those abilities. They're working on consciousness. They're working on the psychic component. They're working on the ET consciousness. They know about it. So the fact that they know that, again, ufology can learn how deep is this non-disclosure? How deep is the involvement? Where are we at with our interaction with the ETs? And you, just like the managers are learning about the ETs from us abductees, the UFO community and the world can learn what the managers know from us abductees, from the milab cases. Okay. Knowing the answers to these questions would go a long way in providing ufology, the UFO field, a roadmap to bring about a real official disclosure. What do the information managers know? Who knows it? Who all is involved? When did they know it? And ultimately, what are they doing with that information? It is time for ufology to take the milab evidence out of the closet. After all, some of the best evidence for the reality and importance of ET abductions. If ET abductions, alien abduction wasn't happening, why would all this be happening? This is, to me, it's the best evidence for the reality of ET abductions, the fact that all this is going on. Could it be that abductions are a central reason, could they be the central reason why a policy of non-disclosure is still in place? Everyone says, why have they told us? Why is there no disclosure? What if this, the abduction scenario, is the problem? Okay. What if abductions are the main reason the ETs are even here? The hybrid program. What if the hybridization program, which is why abductions happen? Yes, there's many other things that happen, but still 80% of abductions involve the taking of ovum from women, sperm from men, and the production of hybrids. And many abductees now feel or saying, okay, we're hybrids ourselves, and our children are hybrids, etc. What if abductions are the main reason the ETs are even here? In other words, it's all about the hybridization program. Yes, it's about, what if the hybridization program is all about consciousness? Because everyone will say, well, it's all about consciousness. Sure. But the hybridization program, you have these beings who had advanced psi abilities, paranormal abilities, mental abilities, intelligence. You know, abductees' kids that they're saying are hybrids are off the charts in their testing and everything. What if, not what if, when that breeds, those are here, we are here. When we breed with the rest of society, overnight that creates a huge seed change. So it is shifting the consciousness of the planet. So what if abductions are all about the hybridization? The hybridization is all about making the human race able to not only communicate with the ETs, but interact with them and join a galactic community. Okay, that sounds really woo-woo, I know, but what if it is that hybrids are being brought here to live here, to shift us, not for takeover? Some people suggest that. I don't think there's any evidence for that. I think there is evidence for shifting our consciousness so we can become a space-faring galactic community and don't take our warring, greedy ways out into space. What if that? I'm just saying, what if? So what if the ET information management people, the covert world, has already known this? The evidence suggests that they have. Hence why abductions become a matter of national security, thus resulting in milabs. Maybe they always were a matter of national security, and maybe they are the reason why no disclosure. Okay? With milab's research, ET abductions are no longer the stepchild of the UFO research community, relegated to being considered only in very separate terms, as if somehow connected, as if somehow unconnected to the other areas of research. And yes, even now, abductions are still considered the stepchild. We're still considered separate from the technology research, separate from the crash retrieval, separate from the insider accounts, separate from all the sightings. You guys, it's not separate. And abductions are why they are here. The hybridization program and that consciousness is why they are here. I feel that very strongly, obviously. Okay. Ufology can no longer afford to separate crash retrievals, reverse engineering programs, technology development, the accounts of insiders, national security issues, UFOs throughout all of history, the cover-up, ET information management considerations, and our disclosure efforts from the abduction phenomena. Those who are managing and controlling the UFO information don't. They don't. So why are we? Why is ufology seeing that all separate? The managers don't. Okay. So we shouldn't either. To leave out any aspect of the UFO equation that may lead to a clear understanding of an extraterrestrial agenda, of a human military and intelligence community agenda, the cover-up, shadow government, SSP agenda, okay, or of a humans and ET working together agenda, which many people call the breakaway civilization agenda, is to have an incomplete picture of the phenomenon. A correct UFO hypothesis must include all the data. Understanding the covert ops involvement in abductions builds a bridge for the inclusion of the ET abduction subject into the disclosure discussion. Obviously, a partial disclosure is no disclosure at all. All you would have then is a repackaged, new and improved cover-up. I think that may be my last one. Oh, there's a part 2, so that's the end. There is a part 2 of this lecture, which is Ufology's Minders, the management manipulation of disclosure for 40 years by the Minders of Ufology. And you may view it for free here. And maybe Pia and company can add that link down in the text, but that link there, and then you go to menu and on demand, and that will take you directly to that presentation, which is for free. It's a different presentation I do, or maybe you guys will have me back and I'll be able to do it for you. So there you go. And that's the end. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Melinda. That was
a lot of talking, blah, 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 blah.
but interesting things, and you make it very clear that it is important that abductions and also milabs are included in all the evidence, and that is a very important thing to get across.
Yeah, obviously I get very passionate about that because it matters so much to me. It's abductions got to be brought up in the disclosure discussion. The rights of abductees. As disclosure goes forward, what do abductees become? Do we become, if disclosure gets sold to the world population as ETs as a threat, what does that make abductees? Do we become a threat? And so what do hybrids become? The enemy? So I'm just saying, this is really important that the whole UFO field really starts to address this. I feel very strongly about that.
I have a first question for you that kind of is a part of what you've just said. So this is a question from Steve, who's here, and he's asking you, from your presentation, one might easily get the impression that all abductions happen with hostile intent.
No, God, no. No. Alien abductions are predominantly about the hybridization. The hybridization is about consciousness. It is about bringing that consciousness to the planet, that we require that genetic enhancement to be a galactic faring community, okay? So it is about shifting us up in consciousness. So that's a very positive thing. Abductions are, I have never, ever said or thought that alien abduction was in any way negative. Can it be frightening? Yes, alien abduction can be a frightening thing, but I always tell people, like on my tours at night, people ask me about it, and I say, If you were abducted from your bedroom or hotel room or something in the middle of the night and taken to the dentist and given all new dental work and a new set of teeth that were beautiful, but you were taken and drugged in the middle of the night, would that be frightening? Yes, it would be terrifying. But what they just did helped you, right? So a lot of abductees, this is another thing that's hardly ever discussed in abduction research, except for by a few researchers, and Preston Dennett is writing a couple new books. You guys should definitely talk to Preston, which is about the healings that take place.
Melinda, we had Preston Dennett on a month or two ago.
Oh, yay! I'm so glad. Okay, because Preston talks about the healings. Exactly.
Yes,
and that's something that's not often talked about. People are healed in these experiences. They're taught psi abilities. They're psychic and psi functioning. Paranormal functioning abilities are enhanced.
That was in reality, the second part of Steve's question was about Preston Dennett.
Oh, so, wonderful.
Yeah, so I have a very funny or interesting thing to tell you, because while you were giving your presentation, I got a message on my phone that I had an email, and it was Grant Cameron who was writing me. And Grant and I, we were speaking earlier by email today, and he was answering an email, and he was telling me he had listened to Sean Ryder on the Joe Woods, the ex-wife of Ron Wood.
Listen to who it broke up for a sec.
Oh, okay. The ex-wife of Ron Wood from the Rolling Stones. His wife, Joe Woods, has made a podcast series in the UK.
Internet problem here. Oh, that's better.
Okay.
There we go. We're better now.
Okay. And Joe Wood has been interviewing different researchers. Yes. I had early in the day sent a link to Grant. He's posted something on Facebook about it. But Grant Cameron, in the middle of your presentation, wrote me back. And he said, oh, I've just seen the one with Sean Ryder. And at the exact same time I read that, you changed your picture so there was a Ryder moving shot.
Ryder truck.
I thought that was so weird.
Yeah.
It was just so weird because I just read Sean Ryder. So
that's very interesting. That just shows you how the consciousness and reaction. And Grant is a research associate of mine. We're very, very good friends. We share research all the time, and we've influenced each other's research and everything. And I think that's wonderful that you were communicating with him during that and talking about Sean Ryder when the Ryder truck comes up. I mean, I love it. That's how it works.
And I wrote him back. I said, "This is crazy."
I love it.
But the stuff like that happens.
And did you tell him I was on right now and that had happened?
Melinda is on live at the moment.
Yeah, he'll get a kick out of that. He's probably texting me on my phone because we talk quite often. We're very good friends. We share research. I mean, you guys, this is about the consciousness, but that's a big leap for people newer to the subject matter. And that's why I always do this presentation so evidence-based. I want it to be about the evidence, because it's the evidence for alien abduction, the evidence for the military abduction, and the fact that military involvement, covert human involvement, is only happening because the alien abductions are real. And what are alien abductions about? Then you get into, well, they're about many things, but obviously a big part of it is the hybridization program, because even though many things happen to abductees, what is the one common thing that comes up in almost all abduction events? Or if an abductee has multiple events, the majority of their experiences are the hybridization, the taking of ovum from women, sperm from men, the production of the children, and then the abductee being shown the children, the abductee interacting with children, teenagers, young adults, and then abductees giving birth to children here on Earth that they feel are hybrids, and then abductee hybrids seen only on ship being brought here to live. So this is current abduction researchers. This is where it's at. That's what it's about. And why bring the hybrids here? To shift us in our consciousness into a higher vibration. Now, we may need to be that higher vibration so we don't take our war and greed out into space. We are a spacefaring world. We are becoming increasingly a spacefaring world with, I mean, every week there's some additional government, some additional country in the world going to space, going to the space station. I mean, it's private companies sending things into space on an ever increasing level.
Yeah.
Obviously, the ETs are like, uh-oh, the kids are getting out of the sandbox, and they're bringing their stuff. I was going to say the other S word, bringing their stuff out into space. You know, so what if? And this is not new. What has been happening with the abductees, what has been happening with hybrids, has been going on for hundreds of years. What if it's a long program? Because they, you know, we were obviously you know, warring and etc. You know, so what if, and aggressive. So what if they have been trying to change us so that we can interact with them? And the covert world that knows this, knows the cat is out of the bag. I think disclosure is not happening because someone said, oh, let's tell people. I think disclosure is happening because it had to happen, because our consciousness is at a point and the acceptance and reality and understanding of an extraterrestrial presence and a UFO reality can't go away. So they're realizing, okay, if there's going to be any trust in the structures that be, the structures that run the world, we need to start sharing this. And so I think disclosure is happening because it happens.
Hey,
it's part of the new consciousness, and it has to happen so we don't spin out of control. But also, the hybrid thing is becoming a bigger deal, and hybrids living amongst us becoming a better deal, because at the same time, that has to happen. I think it's all about our growth as a human race. The human race
Melinda?
has always had, oh, I'm sorry, what? I didn't hear you.
I have a question. I have
okay.
Who would like to ask a question.
I know. Pardon me, I'll put away my soapbox. I get on my soapbox. And
we'll pull you off once in a while here. Pia, her name is also Pia, has a question for you. I'm just going to ask Steve to close his microphone at the same time. Oh, it's closed. Okay, Pia, open your microphone and ask your question.
Yes, hello Melinda, can you hear me?
Hi, Pia.
Hi.
Thanks for listening. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much for your wonderful presentation. It's been very interesting to hear it all.
Thank you.
And I have a few questions. The first one is, you talk about a lot of these abductees, they are being contacted by the men in black.
Yes.
And those black vans, and so does that happen only in the States, or is it worldwide?
But that's a really good question. Everything I've said is worldwide. I have cases from around the world. Paul Stonehill, a famous Russian researcher, now lives in the US. He has said to me many times he knows of multiple Russian cases having all this stuff happen. I've always had cases from England that have had this happen. I admit I haven't had any from the Netherlands, but you know, but I suppose, you know, because again, it's happening everywhere. I have it to Americans traveling, certainly, and in the military abroad, certainly, but I also have it to citizens of these other, you know, countries. So this is a worldwide phenomenon. Obviously, abductions or alien abductions worldwide, but so is the covert involvement. Now, often though, not every time, but often the covert situations, even though they may happen in another country, often involve some US personnel, Americans. So it seems that, or they say English speaking with American accents, you know, this kind of thing, and apparently wearing American military. So it seems though, even though this is a worldwide phenomena, it may be somewhat controlled or organized from the US. I don't know that for sure, but I think there's some evidence to suggest that. I think that's true of the whole UFO policy of non-disclosure / cover-up. Maybe somewhat managed and directed by, it definitely seems to come out of naval intelligence and US naval intelligence. But I'll say that with a caveat because I'm willing to come across information that says otherwise. But I think a lot of the researchers in the UFO field, even international researchers, would agree with me. Like the crash retrievals, the reverse engineering, seems very much to have a heavy US involvement. Only maybe because they were the first ones on the scene or the first ones to develop it ahead of other nations, not because of any superiority. It might just be a historical perspective alone, you know. But I'm going to be wrong. And certainly in the case of Russia, there's a lot of evidence that they've developed this and done this on their own. But maybe behind the scenes, when it comes to secret space program, when it comes to shadow government, maybe there's more working together than we realize. You know, the idea of New World Order is a world order, you know, so that might be behind the scenes. And when it comes to the handling of this subject, it could be from one primary group. But again, I'm willing to be wrong. So truth is, I don't know.
That all sounds very interesting and also scary.
Yeah.
Anyway.
No, and I might be wrong. But the simple answer there is the milab scenario is worldwide, and all the harassment surveillance stuff is worldwide.
Right. Another question from me. There must be experiencers who are not contacted by Men in Black.
Oh, of course. Oh, no. Like I said, I think the harassment, surveillance, minders, all that is about 40% of all abductees. The remaining 60% of alien abductees never have any of this happen.
Okay.
So yeah, you know, but when you think of abductions as being in the millions worldwide, because there's a lot of evidence that it's, you know, in the millions. You know, I mean, there's abduction research organizations with tens of thousands of research cases in their files. I mean, you know, there's no one gathering all the data, but I feel very secure. I mean, 2 different Roper polls here in the US had questions tacked on that said over 4 million people in the continental US were having abductions.
Wow.
So, you know, so if you extrapolate that to a world population, it's simple to say that millions in the, you know, tens of millions, if not thousands, you know, whatever, you know, I mean, obviously millions of abductees. And if 40% of those are having this kind of stuff happen,
yeah,
well, obviously there's a lot of covert involvement and having it happen worldwide, like we just discussed. So, you know, this is happening worldwide. It's happening to a lot of people. And again, though, I think when it comes to harassment surveillance, and I'm being conservative, extremely conservative, to dial that number back to say it's only 40% of alien abductees. And maybe 20% of alien abductees have the re-abduction, abduction by the military, or abduction at the hands of covert humans. But I feel the harassment surveillance is at least 40%. And if a lot of polling was done and it ended up being more like 60%, I wouldn't be surprised. A lot of abductees don't realize they're having this happen. Like a lot of abductees, they have one abduction. Oh, I'm an abductee. Well, no, you've had a lifetime of abductions. It started in your childhood, and you just haven't learned all that, and you haven't remembered all your experiences, and you haven't accounted for all your missing time, and you know, et cetera, et cetera. So most abductees over time learn they've actually had a lifetime of experiences. That's most common. Even some of the famous cases that you think is a one-time event aren't. They know they've had more. They're just not talking about it because they don't need to. They're just talking about one. But it happens repeatedly throughout your life. That's common in abduction research. It's also common to figure out later that you're having harassed. Maybe you're an abductee. Maybe you started to go public, and maybe boom, you have a black helicopter thing. And then maybe you go public a little more, or you start talking on the phone, boom, you have phone interruptions. Then you're befriended by some insider who discloses to you the reality of your experience or asks you questions about it. That's a minder scenario. Boom, you're with other people, maybe there's a military involvement. So the harassment surveillance stuff can start off very low key and go on for a number of years, because they may be trying to determine if you're a person of interest. Are you an abductee they're interested in? Do they want to pursue you further? They may just do a little harassment surveillance, and then it might stop. Remember that, let me see if I can go back there. Okay, let me go this way. Okay, so you guys can see that, right? Okay, this one, you can stop at any point along this. So you can have alien contact through history, past life stuff, genealogical environment, and maybe you never have an abduction. Then you could have sightings, psychic contact, again, maybe you never have an abduction. Then you could have an alien abduction, maybe it stops there. Maybe you don't have any more than that. Then the next thing that happens is the threats and warnings and phone calls. And then it stops. Or you can have surveillance harassment, then it stops. And then you can have MIB or visited by insiders or minders, boom, it stops. You can have an abduction, see aliens with the military, but maybe you have one and it never happens again. What I'm saying is that's why I have this recruitment line, because it can stop at any point, it can go back to the beginning at any point, or it can ramp up. Now, luckily, milab perpetrators, soldiers in an ET war, liaison to communicate with ETs and military space travel, these are all way down the road. Those happen to very few people. But at any point, you can have harassment, surveillance, an abduction by the military, an abduction by aliens with military present. You can be interrogated and boom, have it stop. In other words, it doesn't mean you have all of it. And some people just stop at ET abduction. They have nothing else happen. And sometimes, it just ends there. And then sometimes you start to have harassment surveillance, but they've determined you're no longer of interest to them, So thank God, because I will say this much, everybody who has all alien abductees, even though you deal with the fear or the trauma and the high strangeness of alien abduction, the trouble with integrating it into your life, the feel of isolation, of being alone, not being able to share it with anyone, the fear of ridicule, those are all the negative things. Even though you have a wonderful healing experience and consciousness expansion, and are you able to share that with the people you work with? Probably not, So, at your job, you're able to share it at your job, you're able to share it with all your family, extended family, and all your cousins? Probably not, okay? So you still live alone with it. Those are the difficult parts. The isolation, the fear of ridicule, the having to integrate it by yourself. You're lucky if you find a good hypnotherapist or therapist in the research field who works with people. You're lucky if you get into a good support group,
Yeah,
that's true. Or going to conferences. But in the midst of all that and having to deal with this, can you hear me okay? Because we have a funny interconnect.
Yes.
Okay, you can hear me? Okay, the internet connection kind of wobbles every once in a while. In the midst of all that, you suddenly have this stuff start happening. You can't even tell ufology. Ufology doesn't believe you. Abduction researchers don't believe you. And you start having harassment and surveillance, and everyone says, oh, you're just paranoid. You start having military abductions or seeing military personnel and aliens together, and everyone goes, oh, those are just alien abductions. There's no military involvement. And then you have the far extreme, the mind control community saying, oh, it's all military. There are no aliens. It's like, really? So this stuff becomes even harder to deal with.
Melinda?
Yes.
I've got a question.
Okay.
You just started talking a little bit about.
Keep doing that.
I don't want to insult you or anybody else who has had these who's an abductee, but I would like.
I'm pretty thick-skinned. You could never insult me. Go for it.
These ETs that look like insects, like mantids. Is it
insectoids.
Insectoids? Is there any possibility that they are humans dressed like insects?
No.
No.
I mean, no. In a straightforward alien abduction, they're very commonly seen. It's extremely common. They're usually seen with other types. So often when you see insectoids, you're seeing them with a variety of grays as well. You may also be seeing them with other ET types, whether it's human Nordic types or reptilian types or whatever. They're very odd looking. First off, a person would not fit in that outfit because they have really long necks that have joints to them. Their arms do often, not always, but often that's why they're referred to as mantis beings. They have a large triangular head and a tiny little chin. And then they have those arms that fold like a mantis would.
Okay. All right.
You know, they have, and their bodies their waists are tiny, you know, I mean, there's nothing about them that resembles anything human ever.
Okay. And does anyone know where they come from?
No, many types are seen. We don't really know where they come from. Sure, there's things like, you know, Betty Hill and her star map about Zeta Reticuli. And there's things, you know, people have channeled and gotten information through psychic or consciousness means. But truth is, we don't really know.
Okay.
We can speculate, and I'm not saying that kind of consciousness or psi received data isn't true. It may be very true. I mean, people have said they're from all different types of solar systems. All of that may be true. They may be from many places, but the covert guys who are managing this, who know those answers, aren't telling us. So they're not telling us, and we're left to just speculate.
We're going to wrap it up now because it's almost 11 o'clock here in Denmark.
Oh, so, my goodness. So sorry to go so late. I had a lot to say.
No, it's been so interesting. And there hasn't been that many questions because you've really answered a lot of things along the way. So that it's a good presentation.
Any last question? Do you have even one more? Or?
Now, I know people have to get up to work tomorrow,
Sure.
so I think it's best to stop at the moment.
Well, luckily this is being recorded so people can listen on their own if they weren't able to listen to the end.
Exactly. And I just want to thank you on behalf of our group, and it would be interesting to hear the second lecture and even more you have to say. So perhaps we can find a new time to do one more.
Well, that's a totally separate lecture. It has nothing to do with this. There's maybe just a mention of milabs, but it's all about, there's a group of covert insiders that have been referred to as the working group, and historically referred to as the Advanced Theoretical Physics Working Group. And they have and they're the group behind. They've morphed over the years and changed names, but they're behind what we know here in the U.S. as NIDS, National Institute of Discovery Science, and the original Aviary. So that they were the Aviary, then they were NIDS, then they were BASS, Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Science Studies.
I would love to hear that lecture because it's so important with all the new information coming out.
And it comes all the way forward into the current To the Stars and A-Tip story. And there's a 40-year history of this group. So that's that other lecture, completely different.
Really I would really love to hear that lecture and have a good discussion.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me on and letting me give a really long presentation. But I'm so thrilled to have this information go to a worldwide audience. I can't thank you enough for doing that for me. A great inexpensive way to reach me is messenger me on Facebook. So friend me on Facebook and then messenger me is a great way if anybody has any additional questions or anything.
That sounds good, and I'll be in contact to get the second lecture. So
thank you. I would love that.
Thank you so much for doing it, and have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.
Thank you everybody for listening and participating. I really appreciate your time and your energy, and again, thank you.